Okay, guys. I'm going to do a really quick stream right here. I've had a couple of questions on bunkers, and it was brought up again today, and had a request about some bunkering. So I'm going to go through and do a really quick tutorial on how I personally do my bunkers. Now, one thing that is important to remember is that um, everybody that designs kind of has their own way of doing this. I mean, you can go through 10 different designers, and all 10, while they might have some of the same techniques, are going to have some things they do that are a little bit different than other people as well. So, this is in no way the absolute only way to do bunkers or anything else. It's just how I've chosen to do mine. So, with that being said, we'll run through here and give a couple of examples. What course we want to use for this? Let's do this one down here. I got the most room. So, and definitely want to preface it by saying that even in what I'm about to show, I still do things different on my bunkers, occasionally. I don't always do it the exact same way. I always start out doing it the way that I'm about to do it, but I will oftentimes use a little bit different way that I use the brushes and everything else. One of the first things I do is usually do a soft flatten on my area. I mean, you can technically throw bunkers in here trying to use that ridge line, but it can cause you problems if you're new to the designer and you're not really familiar with doing it. I would tend to start out by flattening out an area. So I just go the soft brush. Hit it about 5 times, in there. That way, it's not going to take it completely down to the bones, but it's going to be reasonably flat on that. So, nope. Okay, and I'm not going to do anything fancy here. I'm just going to use some shapes that I know will give us a little bit of contour in what we're doing here. And you guys watching, if you end up having other questions that you want to ask about certain things or whatever I do, then I'll try to get to it in this one. But the main thing I'm going to focus on is the bunkering. That was what was specifically asked for. Like most designers that have been around for a little bit, I tend not to use a lot of stock shapes and just plant and go. I like building my own shapes out. If I was doing this for real, I'd make these a lot cleaner than what they are, but I'm mainly just doing this so I can get some rounded edges and everything else and kind of give an example. Now, um, when I start in on this, you can already see that just the lay of the land, we've already got some natural things going on. This is just a bunker stuck flat in the ground. And if you leave it that way, people are going to be able to see it. But it doesn't mean that I can't use some of this natural contouring that comes off the land right there anyway. Regardless of what kind of bunker you're going to be doing, you have to understand that when you put the bunker in the ground, it is going to effectively lower the level of the terrain that the actual bunker brush is sitting on. So that'll be more important here in a minute when I do a pothole bunker than this one here. But so once I get this set, the first thing that I like to do is go to flatten, and I start on the first page, top one on the right, and I shrink it down all the way. And there are going to be people that will say and will reply that this is unnecessary, but it's what works for me. I get a good top view of it. I like placing this brush about a yard on the inside lip of the bunker. For two reasons. Number one, it's going to give me a little bit of contrast between the lip and where this brush effectively starts working, and it's going to help minimize the shearing or crimping, is what I tend to call it, that we're going to get on the outside, because you can already see I've got a little bit going on already just from placing the bunker. I mean, it's just part of the editor. It happens. If I put this brush right up against the edge right here and do it, I'm going to crimp that edge even a little bit more. Some people don't mind, some people do. I'm very OCD about my courses, so shearing bugs the crap out of me on my stuff. I try to minimize it as much as I can. It still happens, but I do try to keep it from happening as much as possible. So If I start right here, I'm going to pan out just a little bit, and I'm going to hold down on my X button, and I'm now going to go all the way around the inside lip about that same yard as it goes in. It doesn't have to be exact, but like that corner right there that I just went around where we saw that it had a little bit of a natural contour, this is just going to accentuate that just a little bit. So, and really this is more for just setting the inside edge of my bunker more than anything. You're going to see here in a minute I've got other things I do to flatten out my pan in the base. And this is going to be a pretty big bunker, so it's going to come out looking a lot flatter than a lot of them do when you make these bunkers smaller. You're still going to get the look off of it. It's just going to be in closer quarters. It's going to be a lot more dynamic looking than what this one's going to. I might do another example one here in a second, but right now we're just going to go through this edge right here. And I'm back to my starting point. So sometimes I'll make this larger. Oftentimes I don't. I'm still holding down on my X button. I have not let up on it yet. But now I'm just going to go around and just keep getting tighter and tighter as I go through here. And it doesn't have to be fine or exact. All I'm really doing is setting the level of the terrain inside of that. I'm not trying to make it perfectly smooth and flat by what I'm doing right now. I'm just trying to make sure that I have a general depth of my bunker on this. And you can see I'm just going a little bit more inside every time I go around on it. So one more pass up to the middle right here. Okay, now let up off my button. You can see it's not like perfectly smooth, but you can see where my edges have been set on the inside. So I'm definitely going with what I want to on that. So now I'm going to change brushes, and I'm going to go to the soft fuzzy. I'm going to make it larger, and I'm going to raise it up 1 foot exactly. And now I'm going to kind of do the same thing. I'm going to hold down on my X button. I'm going to make one just big broad pass, into the middle. I don't really want to mess with that edge that I've set over there. Sometimes it happens. You can go back and clean it up a little bit later if you want to. But now I'm getting closer and closer to fine tuning the pan of my bunker. So do it again, and I'm just a little bit more flat than I was before. So now I'm still going to keep that 1 inch. I'm going to make this a little bit larger, and now I'm just going to spot it up wherever I feel like I need to. So I'll come back through here. Actually going to make it really big into this area right here. And you see how that dropped that right there, but I'm still keeping everything pretty much the same level through here. So on this one, actually, I'm going to hold the X button down and drag it through there just to give it a little bit more even feel. And I'm probably going to do the same thing right here. I'm just going to go from this edge where I've got a good depth, hold down the X button, bring it in, and then let it drop. Back out of it, give it a quick look. For the most part, that's livable. I'd probably still fine tune it just a little bit, but I've now got a flat basin bunker down in there, and you can see I've got my edges, of it set. And I mean, you can always come back in, you can play around with this, like if you want this edge in here just a little bit deeper than what it is going up in through here. So just come back along your edge right here. and set it. That's going to give you that ridge, and then come back in with this brush, make it a little bit larger, raise it up a foot, and run it back in there again. And that's going to set me a little bit different. And that's, if you're playing into a slope, you want that a little bit more sloped up or something. So this definitely isn't a finished product, for me. I'd play around with it and get it. But that is, in general, how you go about it. And even if you put it in there, nobody can say, hey, your stuff's not sculpted or anything else. Now, if you're wanting to do your contouring around this to make it a bit more dynamic, this is why I flattened it out beforehand, because now I can come back and I can do some raising and such to give me, my look in around here. So I want to get that lip right there, and let's say take it up generic 2 feet. I'll probably play around with it some before I just set it, but this is going to give you an idea. So. So, and you can see back there, that's where you're starting to get your ridging. It's not quite as dynamic on this because it's such a big bunker, but that is how you do it versus, taking and saying, I've seen people do this, and I mean, some people do this quite well, and this is what works for them. I don't really like this method because it just doesn't end up as being as clean for my taste, anyway, or for my style. Doesn't necessarily do it, but I'll see people raise here, and they'll come in with the flatten tool. And then if they wanted to carve this out, they might come in and say, if they're going to make a round bunker, come in and say, okay, now we're going to flatten it, and they're going to take it down, here, and then come in and place a bunker. You can do this. It just tends to not look as clean, in my opinion. Or, once again, for the style that I do, it doesn't end up as clean as I prefer. So, they come in and do it, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I just find that when I go to actually sculpt this, it doesn't. I've reset basically my depth when I'm doing this, so it ends up looking a little bit more ragged than I would usually prefer my stuff to look. I'm going to say that now this one's going to actually turn out pretty decent. I know, yeah, I mean, that's actually not horrible, but just when I start doing terrain manipulation, you'll see it get a little bit funkier around the edges. You can see where it's doing that right there, and I can usually avoid some of that by doing it my different way. I have seen people, I think Canuck does it this way, but once again, it's nothing wrong with this method. It's just not my style, but I've seen him, I think, where he'll come in and he'll put that same shape inside of it, and then either hit it, and let it go down that way. Um, I tend not to be a fan for my style of doing it that way, but, nothing wrong with it. Let's do another really quick one. Something that's probably closer to what I would do. So step off over here. So let's say I want to take advantage of that hill right there behind one of my bunkers. So something I tend to do is a lot of freeforming. So I'll give you an example of how I start setting up some of my bunkers. So I'm coming in. I want this to have that shape there. you know, something like that there. So typically when I use those shapes, I'll come back in with just a flat round one and or the straight round one and kind of mess around, because you'll see that as I'm putting it down there, it's smoothing it out a little bit for me as I'm going. Using some of those curvy edged brushes sometimes doesn't hit everything. And then I'll come back and flatten. Go back to my first page, top right hand corner. Have to be careful in these little areas right here. These can get away from you really quick, but this is why I wanted to do it. It'll be a good example of kind of how I do this. You have to be careful. You don't want to just keep on doing this over and over, like letting up off the X button, which I'm doing, by the way. I'm holding on the X button, but you don't want to do this once and then come back and do it again and then do it again. You're going to overwork it, and you're going to change the terrain to such a place that it's just not going to look good. So I'll let off of it. That's going to give me my basic pan coming out of there, and you can see that now then I've got a lot deeper bunker with a little bit more dynamic look to it. So same thing, come back to the soft fuzzy. So I'm going to make it a little bit bigger right here, not much. Raise it up a foot. And just kind of starting here, and I'm just really going to focus on the middle. I don't want to play with those edges too much. Like I just did with that one there. This should just give it an overall nicer look. Smoother look and finished look to it than come back here in the middle. And you can see where it's dropping it, just making it smoother, and I still have, you know, a pretty good, nice shape to it without just crimping the crap out of it. And it's easy to crimp right here. You can see I just did it with what I just did. See, I'm getting that little edge right there. That actually will crimp it, and it probably did beforehand. But you're going to hide some of that with the lighting and everything else anyway. So, but anyway, that's how I get the basic look to my bunkers right there. So I've got my scope or sloped edges up there that just kind of gradiate down and everything else. On my corners, they're just well defined. And then I've got a flat place down here, so when the ball lands in, you know, they're hitting off of a flat pan versus something that's just like jacked up and edgy and everything else. So that's how I do that. Now, there was a question about pop bunkers, and I think once again, everybody has a different way. I'm not going to say I'm the best at it. I definitely have my own style. It's not dissimilar from what we just did right there, but same thing. I typically want to start with a pretty flat area, and that doesn't mean I'm always going to make it as large as this area that I'm doing right here. I'm just doing it to give myself that area. So I'm going to create another bunker. We're going to bring out here, and I'll either use this round shape or this oval shape. I actually like both of them for different reasons. For this, I'm going to use a round. Make it a little bit bigger. So, it's going to start like that. Same thing. I don't deviate from this too much. The only thing that I will do different that is if I know that I want this to be elevated to actually give me that pot bunker look to it, then I'm actually not going to do any sculpting up on that part. I'm going to be down here at the bottom. As I'm going around my circle, about right here, I'm going to cut inside and clip it a little bit so I'm not affecting as much of that. It's still going to shrink it a little bit, but not quite as much. And the reason being is I want more of a sloped look on that side than the other. So you can see it gives me a flat pan there. It's still elevated on that side. So now I will not do that. I will not go with the soft edged, the round fuzzy, and do the 1 foot elevation and do it again. I'm actually going to do my contouring on the outside of this, and then I'll go back and fine tune it after that. So we're going to go up 2 feet right there. I'll be careful how I'm doing this here so I'm actually not getting in there and affecting my, which I may have. No, I did okay on the other one. So, and then that's going to start creating kind of that look to it. I'll actually come back now and use my round fuzzy, make it a little bit larger. Take this down. Notice I'm not flattening, I'm raising. So I really don't want to mess with the flatten tool too much outside of that. So I'm starting to get my look, coming in there. And now I can come back in with the flatten, with that soft fuzzy, shrink it up. I'm going to take it about right in here. I still don't want it really affecting that edge too much. Raise it up a foot. Click it, and now we've got a pretty good pan, with this up here. And I probably brought this slope a little bit too much into this where it's affecting that part of the bunker. I can still go back with this brush. I actually do this quite a bit on these style bunkers and raise it up about 7 inches, 6 or 7 inches. That way I'm not affecting my depth too much, but then run it back around the inside edge here to give me a pretty defined lip on it. That still shrunk it more than I wanted to, so. There we go. Not quite as bad. And then, I can do things anywhere from doing a mass raise, where I come out in this area just to like raise to where that lip might be up some. If I take it up a couple of feet, and I may still have to go in and redo this, a little bit on the inside, but that right there is pretty much where I'm wanting that shape on that bunker. I can do different sculpting. I use this one quite a bit outside of the area over there where to blend this in, I might come back in and this is actually one of my favorite terrain manipulation brushes for raising and lowering, depending on what I'm trying to do. Yeah, it was generic. I wasn't working that too much. I'll use this brush every once in a while, like over here on this side where I can. I want to do that. That way it's not just that round, fuzzy, straight terrain change, but you can start to see where it's setting in there. You can do things where now then if you wanted to, you can get kind of crazy creative. And I'm able to do this because I've got my pan set down there. I've got my flattening done. I don't really have to mess with it a whole lot from this point. So now then, say I wanted to come in and really sink this thing in. Um, Really well. Now I can come back in, like lower it like another foot and a half or something like that. And now I've really got a pot bunker that's set in there. But if you notice, I haven't lost, a consistent pan down here, and I'm not really bad crimped and it looking all janky around the edges where I've got right there. So now it would just be a case of playing around with the terrain a little bit and around here. You want to be careful doing this using the flatten tool. It can get away from you in a hurry. But, I can conceivably run fairway like right up to the edge right here. And then, if somebody runs off in it, then playing from this right here, I've got a pretty stiff test coming out of that bunker. Um, I can shrink it a little bit, come back in here and even, go a little bit more on this depending on exactly how you're wanting to do it. Or actually, I'd probably do that a little bit different. Do a raise on it. So like some of the bunkers you see on some of the English courses, some of the most famous courses and everything else, I can raise around here and effectively get that lip up without affecting my contouring in my bunker too much. So there's different shapes you can play around with. It's going to give you different looks and everything else. But all in all, guys, that's kind of how I do my bunkers. Like I said, if I wasn't trying to do a rush tutorial, I would, refine it just a little bit more. And obviously, as I'm doing it, I have different things that I will do to give it a different look or to make sure that it's as smooth or, looking the way I want it to. But that's the overall general way of how I do bunkers. So hopefully that helps some of you newer guys out. And if you ever have any questions, feel free to PM me on the boards. Thanks, guys.